Of the spies that you cover, who do you think was the most innovative?
The ones covered in this book, I would say Elizabeth Van Lew, Civil War spy. Um, Remember, this was the middle of the 19th century. This is a single woman in the heart of the Confederacy, living in Richmond. No training whatsoever, no experience, yet she abhorred slavery and wanted to defend the Union cause, so agreed to or volunteered to spy. She developed her own communication system. She used concealment devices in order to hide her, egg baskets, books, and so on, because she used to go to a prison in Richmond where Union soldiers were held, and sometimes they could give her information about what happened in the battle, and she would smuggle these out of prison on her own. Um, the information that she got, she would split it up into different sections so that if anybody was caught bringing the information to the Union, they would only have one part of the message. She developed her own courier system using sympathetic farmers and merchants and slaves especially, and that was a real advantage in a sense because Southerners looked at slaves as they certainly weren't capable of espionage. She planted one of her former slaves that she had sent for an education to the North. She managed to get them a job working as kind of a maid in the house of Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. So she was literally right inside the council of the adversary. Um, Being African American, a slave, I'm sure there were all kind of conversations took place at that dinner table with Jefferson Davis and his generals and his cabinet members and so on. And they didn't pay her any attention, and she was able to report this all back to Elizabeth Van Lew. So I would say, for somebody with very little training, she was, to me, the most innovative of the ones I covered in this book.
What spy did you find to be the most audacious?
I would say Thomas Conrad, who was a spy for the Confederacy. He's an interesting figure. He's actually a Protestant minister, a preacher. And early on in his spy career, that gave him perfect cover to go behind Union lines. Nobody would ever suspect that a man of the cloth would be a spy. But in fact, Conrad was following a long tradition of clerics who have spied over the years. Going back to maybe Cardinal Richelieu in France, priest who actually spied against the Nazis in World War II. But what I found most audacious about him is he had a number of spies working in the Union government as clerks in many respects. He also had one spy who was in Union counterintelligence, working in the organization run by a gentleman called Lafayette Baker, which is known as the National Detective Police. So it's the perfect place, of course, to have a spy because he can tell you, how close are they getting to you or to any of your other sources. And in fact, this man did tell Conrad that they were getting close. And so Conrad said, "Okay, I've figured out what we'll do. You tell him you have figured out who the spy is, and it's me. And I'll hightail it out of town. When they come, they'll realize you were right. They certainly won't think you're a spy. In fact, your reputation will be enhanced." So it was a risky move, bold move on his part, and it worked. He did get out of town, and he actually later was able to come back into Washington and continue his spy.
Who do you think was the best spy catcher?
Well, in the period covered in the book, it's all kind of relative because among the Americans, none in a sense were all that effective because the Americans really didn't like counterespionage and didn't pay that much attention to it. But probably one of the, early pioneers is Allan Pinkerton during the Civil War. He's, of course, is famous for the Pinkerton Detective Agency, and he started out as a detective. And he applied some of the techniques he used in his law enforcement work to finding spies. He's really the first one to use surveillance on suspects. He also introduced another method, is like to put sources around your these suspects or people you're investigating to get kind of the full picture. And he'd take people who would play roles in every layer of society. People who are well-to-do and rich, influential, all the way down to gardeners or the maids, and as he said, to encircle the target to get the full information about him. And he was successful in some cases doing that. Others, some mistakes were made, and he lost out. But he did introduce those methods from law enforcement into counterespionage, and that worked. And of course, it's still used today. If you read about Donnie Brasco, the FBI sort of infiltrates the mob. So Pinkerton's techniques were applied both in counterespionage as well as in just traditional law enforcement. So I'd have to say he was probably the most notable of the spy catchers in those 200 years covered in the book.
Do you have a favorite story about a double agent?
Yes. So this would be in the interval between World War I and World War II. It's a good story because it illustrates how and why the Nazis failed in their espionage attempts against the United States. I think they espoused Hitler's arrogance and his belief in the supremacy of the Aryan. And in one case, there was a German native, a gentleman named Wilhelm Dombrowski, who he was on a steamer, jumped ship, German citizen, and decided to jump ship in Galveston, Texas, changed his name to William Siebold, and became an American citizen. Right before the onset of World War II, he traveled back to Germany to see his mother. The Gestapo, found out about he's an American citizen working in working in an aircraft factory. So they basically enlist him there and say, "You're going to work for us." And they were going to train him to be a radio operator because they had so many spies in a lot of these defense factories in the United States that they wanted to make sure their information was communicated back very quickly. So he said, "Okay, I'll do it." He said, "I just have to go to the American consulate here because I'm not coming home on time. I got to tell my wife, wire her some money." And what he does is go to the American consulate and say, "The Nazis they want me to be a spy." The FBI essentially made him into their spy. He came back to the United States, set up a phony office, a phony business in Manhattan. He had a home in Long Island, which is where he would transmit messages. And soon, the Germans in the United States, the network, were adding more and more people to his network. So he was basically identifying more and more spies. And his office was rigged up with video and audio by the FBI, so they recorded all these people coming there. And finally, one night, they just to make the story short, they essentially came in, swooped up, and arrested all of them in the network. And Hitler was furious, and how could this happen? Well, a trial occurs, and who do they trot out as a witness? William Siebold, who of course had direct contact with all and was able to identify him. And it was right at the moment when war was about to outbreak, the United States is going to be attacked at Pearl Harbor and declare war against Germany. The German eyes and ears in the United States they're basically blind and deaf because of this mistake. They just assumed this person, born German, will just tell him what to do and he'll loyally follow orders. They did no security checks whatsoever. They also expose all this number of agents to him. You never should do that. So they made a lot of mistakes, and they probably did so out of arrogance, thinking that this guy will just do. He's a loyal Aryan German. He'll do what we say, and everything will be fine. It wasn't.